"This is a disgrace!" my daughter-in-law shrieked, her perfectly manicured nails stabbing at the lawyer's desk. "An old woman who never worked a day in her life shouldn't own anything." The lawyer smiled that professional smile, lawyers perfect over decades of practice. "Actually, Mrs. Thompson has owned everything for the past 30 years. Your husband never owned a single share." "My name is Margaret Thompson. I'm 68 years old, and 3 days ago I buried my husband of 45 years in the rain-soaked cemetery on the edge of Boston. Today I'm sitting in a leather chair in the offices of Whitaker and Associates, watching my entire family's world collapse around them. And I'm not going to lie to you. Part of me is enjoying every single second of it. The law office smells of old books and expensive cologne. Mr. Harold Whitaker, who has been our family lawyer for 3 decades, sits behind his massive mahogany desk with a folder in front of him that contains my late husband Robert's will. Around me sit my 2 sons, Jonathan and Peter, and their wives, Vanessa and Clara. All 4 of them are dressed in black, though I noticed Vanessa's dress is Chanel, probably purchased with money that was supposed to go toward the brewery's payroll. Not exactly the picture of grief, but then again, genuine emotion has never been Vanessa's strong suit. Jonathan, my oldest at 43, sits forward in his chair with that eager expression he's had since he was a boy, eyeing the last cookie on the plate. He's wearing a suit that costs more than most people's monthly rent, his hair perfectly styled, his Apple Watch gleaming on his wrist. Peter, 40, sits with his arms crossed, trying to look somber but failing to hide the calculation in his eyes. He's always been the quieter one, the one who smiled and nodded while plotting 3 moves ahead, like a chess player who only knows how to move pawns. Me? I sit in the corner in my simple black dress from Macy's, the one I bought on sale 3 years ago. My hands, rough from decades of actual work they know nothing about, rest quietly in my lap. No one has offered me a chair closer to the desk. No one has asked if I'm comfortable. No one has even really looked at me since we arrived. I'm invisible. I've been invisible for 30 years, and that invisibility is about to become their worst nightmare. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Whitaker begins, opening the folder with deliberate slowness. "I know this is a difficult time for the family." "Let's just get on with it, Harold," Jonathan interrupts, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of a man who's never been told no. "We all know how this goes. Dad and I discussed this years ago. The brewery and the pub chain go to me. Peter gets the distribution warehouse, and Mom gets the house and whatever personal effects she wants." Mr. Whitaker's expression doesn't change, but I see his fingers tighten slightly on the folder. "Actually, Jonathan, that's not quite how it works." "What do you mean?" Vanessa's voice is sharp, accusatory. "Robert promised Jonathan would take over the brewery. Everyone knows that." "The brewery that Jonathan has been managing so successfully," Clara adds with a pointed look at me. "Unlike some people, he actually understands business." The comment hangs in the air like expired milk left out in the sun, obvious, unpleasant, and not nearly as subtle as she thinks. For years, I've heard variations of this at family dinners, at Christmas gatherings, at birthday parties. "Margaret, you wouldn't understand. It's a business thing." "No need to trouble Mom with the details." "Maybe you should focus on your garden, Mother, and let the men handle the company." Even at Robert's funeral, I overheard Vanessa telling someone, "Well, at least now the boys can finally modernize things." Robert was too sentimental about Margaret's feelings. She's never worked a day in her life, but somehow she always had opinions about how they should run things. "Never worked a day in my life." The phrase echoes in my head as Mr. Whitaker clears his throat. "Let me read the relevant portion," he says, adjusting his glasses. "I, Robert Michael Thompson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my estate as follows. To my wife, Margaret Elizabeth Thompson, I leave my personal effects, my vehicle, and the full contents of our joint savings account, which as of this reading contains approximately $47,000. Jonathan and Vanessa exchange a glance. That's less than they were hoping for, I can tell. Probably thought there'd be hundreds of thousands in cash just sitting around gathering dust and interest. I also leave her the house on Beacon Hill, the summer cottage in Cape Cod, and her beloved herb garden with all its contents and associated equipment. There's a moment of silence, and then Vanessa actually laughs. It's a cruel, tinkling sound, like glass breaking at a very expensive party. Her herb garden, she repeats, looking at Clara. He left her the herb garden. What is she going to do? Sell basil at the farmer's market? Clara giggles behind her hand. Well, I suppose at her age, she needs a hobby. Though honestly, Margaret, you might want to consider something less labor-intensive. Bingo, perhaps? And the businesses, Jonathan demands, his patience, never his strongest quality, wearing thin. Get to the important part, the brewery, the pubs, the warehouse. Mr. Whitaker looks at him over his glasses with the expression of a man who's about to ruin someone's day and is professionally obligated to pretend he's not enjoying it. To my son, Jonathan Robert Thompson, I leave my golf clubs, my watch collection, and my grateful acknowledgement of his years of service to Thompson Brewery. Jonathan's face goes white. Service? What about ownership? To my son, Peter Alexander Thompson, I leave my book collection, my tools from the original brewery workshop, and my grateful acknowledgement of his years of service to Thompson Distribution. This is a joke, Peter says, standing up. Dad wouldn't do this. Sit down, Peter, Mr. Whitaker says, and this time there's steel in his voice. I'm not finished. Peter sits, but his jaw is clenched so tight I'm mildly concerned about his dental work. As for Thompson Brewery, Thompson Pub Holdings, and Thompson Distribution Services, Mr. Whitaker says, looking directly at me for the first time, these businesses are not part of Robert's estate. What? Jonathan explodes. What do you mean they're not part of the estate? Robert did not found the brewery. He was never the owner of record. He was, legally speaking, an employee. The room is so silent I can hear the antique clock on the wall ticking, presumably counting down the seconds until someone's head explodes. These businesses have been registered in the name of Margaret Elizabeth Thompson since 1993. She is, and has always been, the sole owner and proprietor. For a moment, no one moves. No one even breathes. It's like watching a computer try to process information it doesn't have the software to understand. Then Vanessa stands up so fast her chair tips backward. That's impossible. That's fraud. Robert managed the brewery, Mr. Whitaker corrects with admirable patience. Margaret owned it. This is insane, Jonathan says, but his voice has lost its confidence. Mom doesn't know the first thing about business. She's never worked a day in her life. She doesn't even have a college degree. And this, right here, is the moment I've been waiting for. The moment that makes everything that's about to happen absolutely worth it. I stand up slowly, smoothing down my simple black dress. All eyes turn to me, some shocked, some angry, all confused, like they've just discovered their houseplant has been running a Fortune 500 company. Actually, Jonathan, I say, in a voice that's quiet but steady, I have a degree in business administration from Boston University, with a concentration in finance. I graduated summa cum laude in 1974. Jonathan's mouth opens, but no sound comes out. It's the quietest he's been since he learned to talk. Before I married your father, I worked for Wellington Management Company on Congress Street. I was a financial analyst specializing in small business acquisitions and growth strategy. That's, Clara stammers. You never asked, I reply simply. In 1979, when your father and his partner bought that failing brewery on the harbor, I'm the one who structured the deal. I'm the one who secured the financing. I'm the one who negotiated with the banks. Naturally, none of this appeared in any of the glowing stories your father told at parties. But then again, bankers rarely make for exciting dinner conversation. I walk slowly to Mr. Whitaker's desk and take the documents he's holding out to me. In 1993, when we expanded to the pub chain, I'm the one who ran the numbers, created the business plan, and convinced the banks to loan us the money. Your father was brilliant at making beer and charming customers. He was the face everyone loved, but I was the one who made sure we had the capital to buy our ingredients, the strategy to expand to new markets, and the financial planning to survive 3 recessions. Why did no one know this? Peter asks, and for once there's no calculation in his voice, just genuine confusion. Because in 1974, a woman my age couldn't get a business loan in her own name, I say, because customers didn't want to buy beer from a brewery run by a woman, because your father and I agreed that he would be the public face and I would work behind the scenes, and because, frankly, it was easier that way. Sexism is exhausting to fight when you're trying to build a business. I look at each of them in turn. So, yes, I've never worked a day in my life, except for the 40 hours a week I spent managing the books, the 15 hours a week I spent meeting with accountants and lawyers, the countless nights I stayed up reviewing contracts, and the weekends I spent analyzing market trends. But other than that, absolutely nothing. But you were always home, Vanessa protests weakly. You cooked dinner. You were just there. I was home by 6 p.m., I correct, after working from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the brewery office. The office your father told everyone was his, but that was actually mine. The desk you've probably put your feet on, Peter, that was where I built an empire. The word empire hangs in the air. I can see them processing it, trying to reconcile their image of me as a simple housewife with this new reality. It's like watching someone try to solve a Rubik's Cube while wearing oven mitts. This is all very touching, Vanessa says, recovering some of her composure. But it doesn't change anything. Even if you technically own them, Margaret, you'll need Jonathan to keep running them. The businesses need him. I smile for the first time since entering the office. It's not a kind smile. Actually, Vanessa, that brings us to the second part of today's meeting. Mr. Whitaker? Mr. Whitaker pulls out another folder, this one notably thicker than the first. Mrs. Thompson requested a full audit of all business operations over the past 5 years. The results are concerning. He opens the folder and begins laying out documents on the desk like a dealer at the world's worst poker game. Financial statements, bank records, loan applications, credit card statements. The paper trail of my son's betrayal, helpfully organized with color-coded tabs. Jonathan, Mr. Whitaker begins, you've taken out 3 separate loans against the brewery over the past 18 months. The total amount is $147,000. Jonathan's face goes from white to red in approximately 2 seconds. Those were business expenses, necessary investments. Were they? I ask quietly. Because according to these statements, $43,000 of that money went to a Porsche dealership in Newton, another $28,000 to a Caribbean resort, $15,000 to an online poker site. Should I go on? Vanessa's hand flies to her mouth. I genuinely can't tell if she's shocked by the revelation or shocked that I discovered it. Possibly both. The brewery needed equipment, Jonathan protests, which is technically true in the way that saying, I need a yacht is technically expressing a need. With what money? I ask. The brewery's profit margins have dropped 34% in the 3 years you've been managing it. You've alienated 2 of our biggest distributors with late deliveries. You've missed payroll twice, forcing me to transfer money from my personal accounts to cover it. I turn to Peter, who has gone very still in his chair, like a rabbit hoping the predator won't notice him if he doesn't move. And you authorized the purchase of $89,000 worth of new equipment for the warehouse without running it by me first. The old equipment was breaking down, Peter says defensively. I agree, I reply, which is why I had already budgeted $45,000 for equipment replacement in next year's plan. But you didn't wait. You didn't ask. Mr. Whitaker flips to another page. The equipment you purchased was top-of-the-line commercial grade, far exceeding what the business actually needed. A similar but more appropriate system would have cost $52,000. I wanted the best, Peter says, which is what every person who's bad with money says right before they file for bankruptcy. You wanted to impress your college friends when they visited, I correct. I saw the Facebook photos. Check out our state-of-the-art facility, you captioned it. Meanwhile, our insurance premiums went up because you didn't properly install the safety features, and we got hit with a $12,000 OSHA fine. Very impressive indeed. Mom, Peter says, and for the first time he sounds less like a defensive man and more like a scared boy. I was trying to grow the business. You were trying to look successful, I reply. There's a difference. And speaking of looking successful, I turn to Mr. Whitaker. Tell them about the house. Mr. Whitaker pulls out another document. Peter, you used company funds as part of your down payment for your house in Newton. The amount was $34,000, which you categorized as a business loan in the company books. Clara gasps. You told me that was from your bonus. It was going to be from my bonus, Peter says, not looking at her, which is an interesting way of saying, I stole it and hoped no one would notice. When what? I interrupt. When the business you were running into the ground suddenly became profitable? When the equipment you overpaid for somehow generated enough revenue to cover your theft? It's not theft, Peter says weakly. You're right, I say. Theft implies you took something that wasn't yours. This is embezzlement, which is theft with paperwork, much more sophisticated. Jonathan has been quiet during this exchange, which is unusual for him. When I turn to look at him, I can see his mind working through scenarios, exits, ways he can spin this. It's like watching someone try to calculate a tip after too many drinks. The effort is visible, but the results are questionable. Look, Mom, he finally says, switching to that charming tone he uses when he wants something. I know it looks bad, but the businesses are struggling because the market has changed. Craft beer is a tough industry now. If anything, we've been keeping things afloat despite difficult circumstances. Is that so? I ask. Then explain to me why Thompson Brewery's revenue has declined while the craft beer market in Massachusetts has grown by 23% over the same period. Explain why 3 of our competitors have expanded while we've stagnated. I let that sink in for a moment before continuing. You want to know why the businesses are struggling, Jonathan? Because you've been treating them like your personal piggy bank. Because you show up at noon and leave at 3 p.m. Because you've hired your unqualified friends for management positions while letting experienced employees quit from frustration. This is ridiculous, Vanessa interjects. You're making Jonathan out to be some kind of villain when he's been working himself to the bone for this family. Really? I turn to her. Is that why he's been playing golf every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon? Is that why he spent 3 weeks in Miami last winter while claiming it was a beer industry conference? The conference was 4 days, Vanessa. I checked. The other 2.5 weeks were what professionals call a vacation paid for with stolen money. Her face goes pale, and I realize she didn't know about the extra time. How much else doesn't she know? Or perhaps more accurately, how much has she chosen not to know? Let's talk numbers, I say, taking a seat at Mr. Whitaker's desk. Jonathan, your total theft and misappropriation of company funds comes to approximately $147,000. Peter, yours is $123,000 when we include the house down payment, the equipment overages, and various other business expenses that were actually personal purchases. Combined, Mr. Whitaker adds, the debt load on these businesses has increased by $270,000 over the past 3 years, while revenue has declined by $180,000 annually. The businesses are on the verge of bankruptcy, I say flatly. Thompson Brewery has maybe 6 months of operating capital left. The pub chain is hemorrhaging money from 3 locations that should never have been opened without proper market analysis. And the distribution warehouse is barely breaking even because of inefficient routing and overstaffing with underqualified personnel. The room is silent. Even Vanessa has stopped protesting. So what happens now? Peter asks quietly. Are you going to shut everything down? Fire us? I look at my younger son, and for a moment I see the boy he used to be. The one who would help me in the kitchen, who would bring me flowers from the neighbor's garden. When did that boy disappear? Or was he ever really there? That depends, I say, on whether you're willing to hear what comes next. Jonathan crosses his arms. Let me guess. You're going to threaten to press charges unless we agree to whatever terms you want. Actually, Mr. Whitaker interjects, Mrs. Thompson could press charges right now if she wanted. Embezzlement, fraud, theft. The evidence is quite clear. Both of you could face significant prison time. I'm not saying you'd get Martha Stewart's prison, more likely something with less interior design and more barbed wire. Clara starts crying. Real tears this time. She should have known, Peter mutters. She should have been paying attention. I was paying attention, I reply. I've been paying attention for 3 years while you both systematically destroyed everything your father and I built. I've been paying attention while you lied to me, stole from me, and treated me like I was senile and useless. I stand up and walk to the window. From here, I can see Boston Harbor, where our brewery sits on the waterfront. Last week, I say, still looking out the window, I overheard a conversation at the brewery. I'd come in early to review some contracts, and I heard voices in the break room. It was Jonathan and some of his friends. I turned to face him. Do you remember what you said about me? Jonathan's face goes pale. Mom, You said, and I quote, my mother has never understood business. Dad ran everything, and now she thinks she's some kind of expert because she balanced the checkbook a few times. The sooner we can get her to sign over power of attorney, the sooner we can fix this mess and actually make some money. I was joking, Jonathan says weakly. Were you? I reach into my purse and pull out a small recording device. Because one of your friends asked what you meant by get her to sign over power of attorney, and you said, we'll just tell her it's for her own protection. She's getting older. She'll believe anything if we say it's for her safety. Vanessa gasps. Jonathan, you didn't. I have 45 minutes of it, I continue, including the part where you discussed putting me in a nice facility once you had control of my assets. A very nice facility, you said, one with activities and pudding cups and probably a lovely view of the parking lot. The silence that follows is absolute. A facility? Clara whispers, looking at Vanessa. They were planning to put her in a nursing home? A very nice one, Vanessa says defensively, then realizes how that sounds. You knew, I say, looking at her. You both knew what your husbands were planning. We were thinking of everyone's best interests, Vanessa says, but her voice lacks conviction. Here's what's going to happen, I say. Mr. Whitaker has prepared documents that outline my terms. You can accept them, or I can let the businesses collapse, file criminal charges against both of you, and you can spend the next 5 to 10 years in prison while your children grow up without you. Perhaps you'll have time to take up a nice hobby. License plates, maybe. That's blackmail, Jonathan says. No, Mr. Whitaker corrects. That's offering mercy, where none is legally required. What are the terms? Peter asks. Mr. Whitaker distributes copies of a document to each of them. I watch their faces as they read. Shock, anger, disbelief, and finally, resignation. This is insane, Jonathan says, throwing his copy on the desk. You want us to work for minimum wage? For 7 years? Massachusetts minimum wage, which is currently $15 an hour, I correct. You'll each work 40 hours per week at your respective businesses, under the supervision of new management that I'll be hiring, people who know what they're actually doing. And what about our families? Clara asks. How are we supposed to survive on $15 an hour? The same way millions of Americans do, I reply. By budgeting. By living within your means. By not buying things you can't afford. I understand it's a novel concept for you. We have mortgages, Vanessa protests. Private school tuition, car payments. Then I suggest you start making some difficult choices, I say. Sell the Porsche, Jonathan. Downsize the house, Peter. Transfer the kids to public school. I hear they even have teachers and everything. Additionally, I continue, pointing to another section of the document, you'll both move into my house on Beacon Hill. What? All four of them say it simultaneously, like a very depressing chorus. The house has 6 bedrooms. You'll live there rent-free, which will help with your budgets. But there are rules. Rules? Jonathan repeats. You'll contribute to household expenses. You'll participate in family dinners every Sunday. You'll do your share of chores. And every morning at breakfast, you'll apologize to me for what you've done. Every day? Peter asks. For 7 years? Every single day, I confirm, until you've paid back every penny you stole, plus interest. Think of it as a daily reminder that actions have consequences, sort of like a very long, very expensive life lesson. This is humiliation, Vanessa says. No, I reply. Humiliation is being called stupid and useless while you're actually running the business they're destroying. This is justice, and it's more than you deserve. What if we refuse? Jonathan asks. Then I file criminal charges this afternoon, I say simply. The room falls silent again. There's one more thing, I say. After the 7 years, after you've paid back everything you stole, you'll each owe me one favor. What kind of favor? Peter asks suspiciously. Whatever I decide at that time, I reply. It could be anything. Working for me for another year, a financial investment, a public apology in the Boston Globe. You won't know until the time comes. That's, Clara starts. Insurance, I finish. Insurance that you'll continue to treat me with respect even after your debt is paid. Mr. Whitaker clears his throat. You have until 5 p.m. today to sign these documents. After that, Mrs. Thompson will pursue criminal charges. That's only 3 hours, Vanessa exclaims. 3 hours is more than enough time to make a decision, I reply. Either you accept responsibility for what you've done, or you face the legal consequences. It's actually quite simple, even simpler than the business decisions you've been making, and look how those turned out. I gather my purse and stand. I'm going to leave you here to discuss this as a family. Mr. Whitaker will be available if you have questions. You have until 5 p.m. Where are you going? Clara asks. I have a lunch meeting, I reply, with the new CEO I'm hiring to run the brewery. You've already hired someone? Jonathan's voice cracks. I've been preparing for this day for 3 years, Jonathan. Did you really think I was going to let you destroy everything without having a backup plan? I may be old, but I'm not stupid, which I realize now is the opposite of what you've been thinking all along. I walk to the door, then turn back one more time. I loved you both more than life itself, I say quietly. I worked myself to exhaustion to give you opportunities I never had. I sacrificed my own recognition so your father could be the face of a successful business. I did all of that because I believe family was worth any sacrifice. My voice hardens. But you taught me that I was wrong. You taught me that love without respect is worthless. You taught me that kindness without boundaries is just weakness to be exploited. So thank you for that lesson. It's the most valuable thing you've ever given me. I leave them there, sitting in that office, their perfect lives crumbling around them. The restaurant where I'm meeting my new hire is a small Italian place in the North End. I arrive early and order a glass of wine, red, a nice Chianti, something I never would have ordered before because Jonathan always said I didn't have sophisticated taste in wine. This from a man who spent $15,000 playing online poker. My phone buzzes. A text from Mr. Whitaker. They're asking questions about the terms. Stand firm? I text back, absolutely, no negotiation. At exactly noon, a woman in her mid-30s walks into the restaurant. She's wearing a professional suit, carrying a leather portfolio, and she has the confident stride of someone who knows exactly what she's worth. This is Sarah Chen, formerly the head of operations at Sam Adams Brewery. I poached her with the promise of equity and creative control. Margaret, she says, shaking my hand firmly, thank you for meeting me. "Thank you for taking the job," I reply. "I know leaving Sam Adams was a risk." She smiles. "A risk? You're offering me 20% equity in a business that, with proper management, could triple its revenue in 5 years. That's not a risk. That's the opportunity of a lifetime." We spend the next hour discussing plans for the brewery. Sarah has ideas I never would have thought of. A tap room that hosts events, collaborations with local restaurants, a distribution deal with Whole Foods. She's brilliant and hungry, and everything that Jonathan pretended to be, but never was. "What about your current management?" she asks. "Your son, correct?" "Jonathan will be staying on," I say carefully, "but in a different capacity. He'll be working in production, under your direction." Sarah raises an eyebrow but doesn't comment. She's too professional for that. My phone buzzes again. Mr. Whitaker. They've signed. All 4 of them. Documents are notarized and filed. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Good news?" Sarah asks. "Very good news," I reply. "Everything is falling into place." But here's the thing that none of them know yet. The thing that makes all of this even more satisfying. The brewery, the pubs, the warehouse, they're worth approximately $1.2 million combined, minus the debts my son's racked up. A respectable sum, certainly. Enough to live comfortably. Enough to make Jonathan and Peter think they were stealing something significant. But they're not my only businesses. They're not even my most successful businesses. 15 years ago, I started something on the side. A little project I never mentioned to anyone except my accountant. I took $50,000 from my personal savings, money I'd earned from consulting work Robert knew nothing about, and I started a tea company. Harbor Tea Company began in my kitchen. I'd been growing herbs in my garden for years, experimenting with blends, creating combinations that I'd serve to friends at book club. One of those friends, Julia, owned a small boutique hotel in Cambridge. She asked if I could supply tea for their guest rooms. That first year, I made $12,000 in profit. The second year, $45,000. By year 5, Harbor Tea Company was supplying 30 luxury hotels across New England. By year 10, we'd expanded to airlines, corporate offices, and upscale grocery stores. Last year, Harbor Tea Company generated $2.5 million in revenue, with a profit margin of 43%. The company is now worth approximately $2.5 million, and I own 100% of it. But wait, as they say in those terrible late-night infomercials, there's more. 8 years ago, I was approached by a Japanese businessman who'd tried Harbor Tea at the Four Seasons in Boston. He wanted to import organic products to Japan, not just tea, but honey, maple syrup, artisanal foods. He needed someone who understood both the American market and international logistics. I started Atlantic Exports with a $75,000 investment. We began with 3 products and 2 Japanese clients. Now we represent 47 New England producers and export to clients in Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Atlantic Exports is worth approximately $900,000. I own 85% of it. So when my sons were busy stealing from the brewery and planning to institutionalize me, I was quietly building an empire worth over $3 million that they knew nothing about. When Vanessa was mocking me for just gardening, I was closing deals with Asian importers. When Jonathan was telling his friends I didn't understand business, I was negotiating contracts that his MBA couldn't even comprehend. The herb garden they all laughed about. That's where I test products for Harbor Tea Company. The hobby they dismissed? That's a multi-million-dollar operation. And here's the beautiful part. It's all mine. Completely, legally, undeniably mine. Robert knew about Harbor Tea. He was proud of it, actually. But he never knew the full extent of its success. I kept the financial details private, tucked away in accounts and investments that bore only my name. Atlantic Exports I built entirely on my own, years after Robert's health had started declining and he'd stepped back from active business management. After lunch with Sarah, I drive to the Harbor Tea Company facility. It's a small warehouse in Somerville, nothing fancy from the outside. Inside, it's a hive of activity. Workers blending tea, packaging products, preparing shipments. The air smells of chamomile and lavender and mint, 1,000 times more pleasant than the yeasty smell of the brewery. "Margaret!" My operations manager, Linda, waves from across the floor. She's a woman in her 50s who left a corporate job at Twinings to work for me. "The Japanese order is ready to ship. Mr. Nakamura sent his approval this morning." "Excellent," I reply. "And the new hotel contract?" "Signed yesterday. 20 hotels across the Midwest, starting next month." I walk through the facility, checking on various operations, and I feel something I haven't felt in years. Pure, uncomplicated pride. This is mine. I built it with my own knowledge, my own skills, my own determination. No one can take credit for it. No one can claim they did the real work while I just helped. My phone rings. It's my sister, Helen. "So?" she asks without preamble. "Did they sign?" "They signed," I confirm. "And you're going to tell them about Harbor Tea and Atlantic exports?" "Eventually," I say. "But not yet. Let them think the brewery is all there is. Let them believe they were stealing something significant. Let them spend a few months working for minimum wage, apologizing every morning, living under my roof and my rules." "You're devious," Helen says with admiration. "I prefer strategic," I reply. "And besides, they need to learn that lesson first, the one about respecting the brewery and the work that built it. Once they understand that, once they've had time to reflect on their choices, then maybe I'll show them what real success looks like." "When?" Helen asks. "I'm thinking 6 months," I say. "After Jonathan's been hauling beer kegs for half a year and Peter's been doing warehouse inventory at dawn. After they've had time to understand what actual work feels like, then I'll tell them." "That's cruel," Helen says, but she's laughing. "That's justice," I correct. "There's a difference." That evening, I return home to prepare for the invasion. The house needs to be ready for 6 additional people, 4 adults and 4 children ranging in age from 8 to 15. I've hired Mrs. Chen, my housekeeper of 15 years, to help coordinate. She's already preparing the 3rd-floor bedrooms when I arrive. "Too much drama," she says in her practical way, fluffing pillows with more force than necessary. "Family should respect Mother. These boys, they forget who raised them." "They're about to remember," I assure her. Over the weekend, the moving trucks arrive. I watch from my study window as my sons and their families unload their lives into my home. The children are excited. Emma and Oliver, Jonathan's kids, racing through the house, choosing rooms. Sophie and Daniel, Peter's teenagers, less enthusiastic but adapting. Vanessa looks like she's attending her own funeral. Clara looks exhausted. Sunday evening, we have our first family dinner. All 10 of us crowded around the dining table. I sit at the head, where I've always sat. Robert's chair at the opposite end remains empty. "Before we eat," I say, "let's establish the ground rules." I outline everything: the monthly contributions, the chores, the mandatory Sunday dinners, the daily apologies. Jonathan and Peter exchange glances but say nothing. They've learned, at least temporarily, when to keep quiet. "Does everyone understand?" I ask. Nods all around. "Good," I say. "Then let's eat." The first month is exactly as difficult as I expected. Jonathan and Peter are physically exhausted from manual labor they've never done before. Vanessa and Clara are adjusting to a lifestyle that doesn't include shopping trips and spa days. The children are surprisingly resilient, though Emma keeps asking why they had to leave their old house. Every morning at 6:55 a.m., my sons come to my study. Some mornings, their apologies are sincere. Most mornings, they're just going through the motions, saying the words because they have to, not because they mean them. But they're saying the words, and that's a start. One Saturday morning, about 6 weeks in, I'm working in my garden when Sophie, Peter's 15-year-old daughter, comes outside. "Can I help?" she asks. I'm surprised. Sophie has been the most distant of the grandchildren, spending most of her time in her room. "Of course," I say, handing her gloves. We work in silence for a while, pulling weeds around the herb beds. Then Sophie says, "My mom says you're being too hard on my dad." "What do you think?" I ask. She's quiet for a long time. I think he did something really bad, and I think you're trying to teach him a lesson. But I also think maybe there's a part of you that's doing this because you're angry about something else. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good, probably. You're right, I admit. I am angry. For years, your father and uncle treated me like I was worthless, like I was just a silly old woman who didn't understand anything, and all that time, I was the one running everything. That sucks, Sophie says bluntly. Yes, I agree. It does. Are you ever going to forgive them? She asks. I don't know, I say honestly. Ask me in 7 years. 6 months pass. Jonathan has lost 15 pounds from the physical labor and actually looks healthier than he has in years, though he'd never admit it. Peter has developed calluses on his hands and a new appreciation for the people who work in his warehouse, or rather, my warehouse. The daily apologies have become routine. Some days they're heartfelt, most days they're automatic. But both of my sons have stopped trying to argue or negotiate. They've accepted their situation, at least outwardly. It's a Sunday evening in late October, 6 months to the day since they signed the documents. We're gathered around the dining table for our weekly family dinner. Pot roast again, because Mrs. Chen knows it's my favorite, and she's quietly Team Margaret in all of this. I have an announcement, I say after we've finished eating. Everyone looks up. Even the children stop fidgeting. I've been thinking about the businesses, I continue, about the brewery and the warehouse and what the future looks like for this family. I can see Jonathan and Peter tense. They're probably expecting more bad news, more restrictions, more consequences. You've both been working hard for 6 months now, I say. Sarah tells me, Jonathan, you've become one of the more reliable workers in production. Tom says, Peter, you've impressed him with your willingness to learn. That's good. That's progress. I let that sink in for a moment. But I think it's time you understood something about the full scope of what you were trying to steal from me. We know what we did, Peter says quietly. We stole from the brewery. We've been paying for it. You stole from the brewery, I agree. But you didn't just plan to steal the brewery. You planned to steal everything I own, everything I've built. And I don't think you ever understood exactly what that meant. I pull out a folder. I've learned from Mr. Whitaker that dramatic document reveals are surprisingly effective, and place it on the table. The brewery, the pubs, and the warehouse are worth approximately $1.2 million, I say. That's significant money, enough to retire on if managed properly, enough to destroy if you're reckless and greedy. Vanessa opens her mouth, probably to protest, but I hold up a hand. But here's what you didn't know, I continue. The brewery isn't my only business. It's not even my most successful business. I open the folder and pull out the first document. This is Harbor Tea Company. I started it 15 years ago with $50,000 from my personal savings. It began in my kitchen, in this kitchen actually, blending herbs from my garden. I look at Vanessa. Remember at the will reading when you laughed about me inheriting my herb garden? When you asked what I was going to do, sell basil at the farmer's market? She has the grace to look uncomfortable. Well, in a sense, that's exactly what I did. Except instead of a farmer's market, I sell to luxury hotels, airlines, corporate offices, and upscale grocery stores across the country. Last year, Harbor Tea Company generated $2.5 million in revenue. The company is currently valued at approximately $2.5 million, and I own 100% of it. The silence that follows is absolute. Jonathan's fork clatters onto his plate. You have a $2.5 million tea company? Clara whispers. Had, I correct. I have a $2.5 million tea company. Present tense. It's currently operating out of a facility in Somerville with 23 employees. I pull out the second document. This is Atlantic Exports. I started it 8 years ago when a Japanese businessman wanted to import organic New England products to Asia. We now represent 47 regional producers and export to Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Atlantic Exports is worth approximately $900,000. I own 85% of it. Peter is doing mental math, his lips moving slightly. That's over $3.4 million to be precise, I say, plus the brewery assets. So when you were planning to have me declared incompetent and steal my assets, you weren't just trying to steal $1.2 million. You were trying to steal nearly $5 million. $5 million, Jonathan repeats, as if saying it out loud will make it make sense. You have $5 million, and you let us think. I let you think exactly what you assumed, I finish, that I was a poor widow living on a fixed income, that the brewery was everything, that I needed you to take care of me financially. I lean back in my chair. Do you want to know the irony? While you were stealing from the brewery and plotting to institutionalize me, I was closing a $1.5 million export deal with a Japanese hotel chain. While Vanessa was mocking my herb garden, I was negotiating with Whole Foods to carry Harbor Tea in 300 stores. While Jonathan was telling his friends I didn't understand business, I was teaching a workshop at Harvard Business School on building sustainable organic brands. Harvard? Vanessa asks weakly. Guest lecture series, I clarify. They've invited me back for next semester. Something about being an inspiring example of women in business, though they don't know about the part where my own sons tried to rob me. That might make the lecture more interesting, actually. Emma, Jonathan's 10-year-old, raises her hand like she's in school. Grandma, does this mean we're rich? No, sweetheart, I reply gently. It means I'm rich. You're living in my house, eating my food, and benefiting from my generosity. There's a difference. I turn back to Jonathan and Peter. I want you to understand something. Every morning when you apologize to me, you're not just apologizing for stealing $270,000 from the brewery. You're apologizing for trying to steal nearly $5 million from me. You're apologizing for planning to institutionalize a woman who was running a multi-million-dollar business empire while you couldn't even run a single brewery without driving it toward bankruptcy. Why didn't you tell us? Peter asks, and he actually sounds hurt. Why didn't you tell us you were this successful? Because I shouldn't have had to, I reply. You should have respected me whether I had $5 or $5 million. You should have treated me with dignity because I'm your mother, not because of what I'm worth financially. I gather the documents back into the folder. But you didn't. You measured my value by what you thought I owned. And when you thought I was worth less, you treated me as less. That's why you're here, working for minimum wage, living under my roof, apologizing every morning, not because you stole money, but because you fundamentally misunderstood what matters. So what happens now? Jonathan asks. You've told us. You've humiliated us even more than we already were. What's the point? The point, I say, is that you have 6.5 more years to think about the lessons you need to learn. And maybe, just maybe, by the time those years are up, you'll understand that success isn't about how much money you make or steal. It's about what you build, who you help, and how you treat the people who love you. I stand up from the table. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a conference call with our Hong Kong distributor in 30 minutes. Mrs. Chen will serve dessert. I leave them sitting there, stunned into silence. As I walk to my study, I hear Sophie say to her father, Dad, I think Grandma just won everything. Out of the mouths of babes. The next morning, Jonathan and Peter arrive at my study at 6:55 a.m. as usual. But something is different. They're not just going through the motions, they actually look like they've been thinking. Mom, Jonathan begins, I'm sorry for stealing from you. I'm sorry for not respecting you. I'm sorry for assuming you were less than you are. And I'm sorry for measuring your worth by what I thought you owned instead of by who you are and what you've accomplished. It's the first apology in 6 months that sounds completely genuine. Peter's is similar. I'm sorry for all of it. The stealing, the disrespect, the assumptions. I'm sorry I never asked about your life, your work, your accomplishments. I'm sorry I only saw you as my mother and not as a person with your own identity and success. Apologies accepted, I say. Now go to work. Over the following weeks, something shifts. Jonathan starts asking questions at the brewery, not the I know better than you questions, but genuine questions about how things work and why. Peter starts reading books about logistics and supply chain management, trying to actually understand the business instead of just managing it from a distance. Vanessa stops complaining about not being able to shop and starts volunteering at a food bank. Clara gets a part-time job at a bookstore, saying she'd forgotten how much she enjoyed working. The children are thriving. Emma has become fascinated with my tea business and asks if she can help with blending. Oliver is growing vegetables in the garden. Sophie is getting straight A's and talking about studying business in college. Daniel has started a small lawn care business in the neighborhood, actually earning his own money. It's not perfect. There are still tensions, still moments of resentment, but there's also growth, which is something I wasn't sure I'd see. One evening in December, nearly 8 months into our arrangement, I'm sitting in my study going over Harbor Tea's year-end financials when there's a knock on the door. "Come in," I call. It's Jonathan. He's holding something in his hands, a folder, I realize. "I've been working on something," he says. "With Sarah's help. I wanted to show you." He hands me the folder. Inside is a detailed business plan for expanding the brewery's taproom into a full restaurant. The numbers are solid, the market analysis is thorough, the projections are conservative but promising. "This is good work," I say, genuinely surprised. "Sarah helped me understand how to do actual research instead of just guessing," he admits. And I realized I'd been doing everything wrong. Not just the stealing, but the way I approached business. I thought confidence was enough. I thought looking successful was the same as being successful. He sits down across from me. "I know I can't undo what I did. I know I can't give you back those years of disrespect, but I want to learn. I want to actually be good at this, not just pretend to be good at it." "Then keep learning," I say. "You have 6.5 years left on your contract. That's plenty of time to become the person you should have been all along." He nods and stands to leave, then turns back. "Mom, thank you for not giving up on us, for giving us this chance instead of just sending us to prison." "Don't thank me yet," I reply. "You still have 6.5 years of minimum wage and daily apologies ahead of you." But I'm smiling when I say it. 2 years later, the dynamic has completely changed. Jonathan has worked his way up to assistant manager at the brewery under Sarah's mentorship, still earning minimum wage per hour agreement, but actually contributing value. Peter has revolutionized the warehouse operations and is writing a book about efficient small business logistics. Harbor Tea Company has expanded to the West Coast. Atlantic Exports has added clients in Europe. I've started a consulting business helping other women over 60 launch second act careers. At our Sunday dinner, the conversations are real. The apologies have evolved from rote recitation to genuine reflection. The children are growing up watching their parents learn humility, responsibility, and resilience. And me? I'm sitting at the head of the table in my house, running my empire, surrounded by a family that finally understands what respect looks like. Vanessa and I will never be close, but we've reached a state of mutual tolerance. Clara has become something like a friend, working part-time at Harbor Tea and proving to be surprisingly good at marketing. 5 years to go on the original agreement, but I'm not counting down anymore. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about punishment and became about something else entirely. It became about teaching the people I love that worth isn't measured in dollars, that respect isn't optional, and that it's never too late to become who you should have been all along. Did you like my story? And which city are you reading from? If you enjoyed this tale of justice and redemption, there are many more stories of families, betrayal, and the power of standing up for yourself. Remember, respect isn't given because of age or gender. It's earned through competence and lost through arrogance.